Hi friends, welcome back to the Cripple Chronicles. I am Becca and today we are going to be doing something a little bit different, but this is kind of how the podcast is going to go because I have now finished kind of sharing most of my story and I'm now wanting to go on to look at different things. Simba is having a wee moment today because it is very sunny outside and he is protesting that he is now an outdoor cat instead of an indoor cat. So if you hear him meowing in the background, apologies, but there's nothing I can do. There's also probably going to be some cuts when I shout at him because he keeps trying to escape out of the window. Anyway, back to what I was saying. The podcast is going to kind of go down a road of exploring different kind of disabilities, different things to do with Ilazarovs and amputation. I am hoping to get some guests on, however, I need to figure out how I'm going to go about doing that. But it's coming, I'm working on it, and yeah, I hope you continue to stick around because I'm really enjoying doing this, to be honest. So, today I am going to be talking about cosmetic limb lengthening. It's something that I had seen back in 2020 with someone using Ilizarov frames to extend their height for cosmetic purposes. I've seen it again recently, except this time it wasn't using a frame, it was through having a rod inserted at which you then hold a control up to the outside of the leg and it creates a magnetic field which then extends the nail that is inside of the rod and it pushes the bones apart. Being someone who went through the process of growing bones in my leg to be able to walk again, having no choice in it and how tough it was, it is very hard for me to understand someone that is willingly going to have their legs broken to gain a few inches of height. However, that's what I'm going to be delving into today. A little about Ilizarov frames, limb lengthening, and the reasons that people tend to get it done for cosmetic reasons. I obviously have my own viewpoint, but I want to try and look at this from all angles. So I have showed my frame and spoke about my journey, but let's talk about Ilizarov frames in more general terms. Ilizarov frames are named after Dr. Gavril Ilizarov, who was a surgeon in Russia and developed this technique and the frame during the 1950s and the 1960s. He had treated soldiers that had suffered limb injuries in World War II, and that was what sparked his interest in limb lengthening and correcting deformities. Initially, his methods were met with some doubt and scepticism, as this was going against the conventional methods at the time, which was internal fixation with plates, screws, or rods, which are still pretty common methods now. But this changed in the 1960s when Ilizarov gained recognition for successfully treating patients with complex limb deformities and length discrepancies. His techniques were effective in correcting bone deformities and showed promising results for bone regeneration, leading to the healing of non-union fractures and the treatment of infected bone. It was used to help treat my infected bone, but I'm not sure if I've had to explain what non-unions are. It does feel pretty self-explanatory that non-union fractures are fractures that don't seem to be healing over a given period of time. This varies for each bone in the body, but in general, if there is no sign of healing between 6 and 9 months after the fracture occurred, then this would be classed as being a non-union fracture. Dr. Ilazarov's contributions to orthopaedic surgery have revolutionised the field and provided new avenues of treatment for patients with complex bone conditions. The frames have definitely went through a few changes since the 1960s. For example, the rings of the frame used to be made out of stainless steel, however now they're made out of materials like carbon fibre or titanium so that the frames are less bulky and lighter. I can't imagine what it would have been like if I had my frame made out of stainless steel with the size that it was. It was already like 8 to 10 kilos on my leg, so having that made out of stainless steel would have been absolutely brutal. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do anything because it would have been so tiring. Advancements in technology mean that planning for Ilazarovs is now easier with computer assisted systems to help with 3D imaging, virtual planning, and the execution of Ilizarov procedures. I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, I think I might have, but initially with the Ilizarov frames, the process of being able to grow bones was discovered by accident. There was this guy just doing his thing, turning the bolts, but he was actually turning them in the wrong direction. So instead of pushing his bones together, he was pulling them apart. And when he went for the appointment, he got the x-rays and they noticed that there was new bone forming in this gap where he had been pulling his bones apart instead of pushing them together. This unexpected discovery was a game changer. It showed that these Ilizarov frames had the potential to stimulate bone growth and help people with deformities or really gnarly fractures heal better. The focus was all about improving medical conditions, not about making people look taller or different. Fast forward a bit and these techniques started gaining popularity in the cosmetic realm. But let's not forget their roots. They were born out of a need to address serious medical issues, not for cosmetic reasons. The other way that limbs can be lengthened is by using a magnetic internal lengthening nail to try and avoid complications that are associated with external fixation, such as pain, soft tissue tethering, pin site infections, limited joint movement, and the prolonged time that you need to wear a frame to achieve union. There are two different types of these lengthening nails, which are the Precise and the Stride. The Precise has been used since 2011, but it was only able to take about 22 to 35 kilograms of weight through it. The Stride nail is able to take 68 to 113 kilograms, and I think this tends to be the preferred lengthening nail that is now used. With these lengthening nails, there is a rod inserted in the leg which has a nail inside of it, and that is then controlled by a magnet. The patient holds a controller to the outside of the leg, and then that activates the magnet to move the nail in small increments. With limb lengthening, it is not recommended to lengthen more than 1 mm a day, as creating a gap too quickly in the bone can mean that new bone then doesn't form, and then in reverse, if you do it too slowly, the bone might form too quickly, and then that lengthens the time that is needed for the limb lengthening process. Now that I have given you a little background on Dr. Ilizarov, the frames and the lengthening nails, let's get into talking about the main bulk of this episode, which is cosmetic limb lengthening. We're not talking about saving limbs or helping people to walk again, but individuals who are already at a good physical state and choose to undergo this procedure like the Ilizarov frames or the lengthening nails to add some extra height. The research on this topic is a bit scarce, so I'm working with limited data here. But let's start with the big question. Why do people opt for limb lengthening when they're already physically fine? There could be a variety of reasons. Maybe they've always felt self-conscious about their height and believe that gaining a few extra inches is going to boost their confidence. Or perhaps they've had specific personal or professional aspirations that they think taller stature can help them achieve. It's all about the personal motivations. Initially, when I saw this back in 2020, I was still very much at the beginning of my limb lengthening journey, and I really couldn't understand why people would willingly put themselves through this process. From doing some research for this episode, one thing that has become apparent is how much of an issue short stature can be, especially for those who present as male. it's like a whole world opens up when you start looking into it. You see that height plays a significant role in various aspects of life. In the realm of dating, everyone has their preferences. Some people might have a thing for taller partners, while others don't really mind about height. I feel like when you deviate from society's norm, it can make finding romance a bit challenging, whether that be height or something else. There are always exceptions to this rule though. While some may prioritise height, there are plenty of people out there that genuinely don't give a shit about how tall or how short someone is. It's all about finding those who actually appreciate you for who you are. There was an Insider article where a surgeon talked about 5 of the most surprising reasons that he has seen people go for limb lengthening over the 13 years that he's been doing these procedures. The first reason that stood out was the unfortunate experience of being made fun of by the people that are closest to them. The surgeon had mentioned encountering several men who were actually of average height or even above average height. However, their peers were taller than them, and it seemed like the height was the thing that they were always getting made fun of for. It's really disheartening, but after the surgery, these patients reported that they no longer were the target of height-related ridicule and they gained a boost in their confidence. The surgeon shared that he had operated on 6 pairs of twins. Sometimes one sibling was wanting the operation and became taller, and then the other twin, because they were identical, they felt like they were too short in comparison and would then have to go for the surgery. Some twins made the decision that they were going to go through with this together. However, it was very lovely reading that they would do it at separate times so that they could support each other through the recovery. The third reason was social media pressure. The doctor stated that he gets clients sending viral clips all the time of women being asked what their preferred height is, and he had said that he thinks that 95% of women say that they want the one that's taller. He had also mentioned the short king movement and how he thinks it's positive, but the guys that are experiencing the negativity of being short don't really believe in it. Reason number 4 revolves around individuals being shorter than their wife or their girlfriend. Sometimes it's the partners that are pushing for the surgery, urging their loved ones to get some extra height, and that was also another thing that was reason number 5, good old family pressure. Parents coming in with people who were 18, 19 years old and saying that this surgery was going to be the thing that really improved their confidence and thinks that they should go for it. My research then took me down another path, job prospects in sport. Studies suggest that in professional settings, taller individuals may be perceived as more leader-like, exuding more dominance, intelligence, and overall good health. It's been mentioned that taller men are more likely to secure management positions, and in some cases, they even earn up to £500 more per year. However, it is worth noting when I was looking for the information around height and pay, it was very hard to find anything that wasn't really outdated, like back in 2014, which is nearly 10 years old. So I don't actually know if that is still as common a thing now. However, that's what it had said back then. It might have changed now. I can totally get it that when someone has been bombarded with comments about their height through their entire life, it can really take a toll on their mental well-being. But here's the thing, it's not their problem. It's a society problem. Why should someone feel the need to shell out hundreds of thousands of pounds just to gain, on average, an extra 3 inches of height? It is absolutely wild to me. We live in a world where height seems to hold so much importance, and it's really not fair. Constantly dealing with height-related comments from childhood all the way through adolescence and then into adulthood can have such a profound impact on someone's mental health, and it's not their fault. It's a result of a society that places so much value on external appearances and shallow judgments. People shouldn't be made to feel like they are lacking or inferior just because they don't fit some unreasoned height standard. It really feels like we should be saying fuck you to these society expectations and stop putting the burden on individuals that they need to conform to this instead of just being themselves. Instead of focusing on changing ourselves physically, we should be working on changing the way that society views and values individuals based on their height. It's not about fixing the person, it's about fixing the flawed mindset that fuels this height obsession. Now, let's talk about the process itself. How does it work when it's not a matter of life or death? It is a pretty similar process. The bones are broken and an Ilizarov frame is put on for them to then move the bolts, or this lengthening rod is inserted between the two pieces of bone. The idea is to gradually separate the bone fragments, allowing new bone to grow in the gap and resulting in an increase of overall limb length. Cosmetic limb lengthening is a commitment. It's not a quick fix. It takes time, patience, and a whole lot of dedication. We're talking weeks, months, and even years sometimes of lengthening with regular adjustments and careful monitoring along the way. I came across a very interesting research study that examined cases of cosmetic leg lengthening in 131 patients between January 1983 and December 2006. This study highlighted the criteria for undergoing the surgery, which included having clear reason for the procedure, strong motivation, and informed consent after being fully aware of the surgery's nature, the potential complications, and the rehab process. The study also discussed the contraindications for leg lengthening, such as the presence of psychological disorders like dysmorphia, associated endocrine disorders, systematic illnesses affecting growth and development, and dysplastic syndromes where bones or cartilage don't form properly. The reason for pursuing limb lengthening varied among patients and included factors like difficulty keeping up with peers in school, requirements for certain sports like volleyball, water polo, basketball, and tennis, job-related demands, and also interpersonal relationship issues, such as dating, like I had mentioned previously. To ensure appropriate treatment, patients underwent comprehensive psychological assessment and counselling sessions. Multiple consultations with the patient and their family were conducted to rule out systematic illnesses, hormone imbalances, dystrophic syndromes, and psychological issues like dysmorphia. The 131 people who underwent lengthening with Ilizarov frames, 48 patients, which is 37% of them, experienced complications. Out of these 48 patients, 7 of them had more than one complication. Out of the 55 complications, there were 37 soft tissue related complications with things like pin site infections and 22 bone related complications during treatment, such as osteomyelitis, which is the fancy name for bone infection. As a result, the pins had to be removed, the infection had to be cleared out, and then pin put back in place. Thankfully, none of these progressed to deeper bone infection, but that is still a concern. The other bone-related complications were things like delayed regeneration, deformity of the regenerated bone with the frame on and then with the frame off. And then one patient also had a break in the regenerated bone a year after removal, which required plates and screws inserted. The average duration of distraction, which is pulling the bones apart, was 79 days, with a range between 17 and 168 days in males. The average in females was 116 days, and they had a range of 31 to 301 days. The average time for wearing the frames for cosmetic lengthening was 215 days, with a range of 71 to 390, so sometimes over a year with the frame on for cosmetic purposes. They believe that the optimum lengthening of the lower limb can be done only up to about 5 to 7 centimetres, as beyond that the outcome would be below par in the view of cosmetics, as the trunk limb proportions would be off, altered biomechanics and soft tissue function. From the 131 patients, the average height gained was 6.9 centimetres, with a range between 2 to 13 centimetres. Those who achieved over 10 centimetres of growth had both their femur and their tibia broken to be lengthened to try and offset the difference in trunk limb proportions. Trunk limb proportions just refers to the relative length of the trunk, the torso, and the limbs, your arms and legs, in the human body. If the legs are lengthened too much, this then makes the torso look too short, and for cosmetic reasons, if you are wanting to do something to feel better about yourself, looking in the mirror when you're naked and seeing how long your legs are in comparison to your torso, it's going to be really off-putting, and then that's going to end up causing a domino effect of issues. In my opinion, I was really interested in what the psychological assessment was like for cosmetic limb lengthening. Although it was challenging to find detailed information about the psychological assessments, I did come across a paper that discussed decisional authority and compliance in terms of cosmetic limb lengthening. Decisional authority refers to individuals' rights to be informed about their condition, available treatment options, and the associated risks and benefits. It is actively involving patients in the decision-making process based on their values, preferences, and goals. Compliance, on the other hand, refers to the extent which the patient follows their healthcare provider's recommendations and the treatment plans. In this comprehensive research study spanning across 3 decades and including 288 cases of limb lengthening using lengthening nails, not the frames, patients underwent rigorous psychological evaluations. These assessments aim to determine their suitability for the surgery based on justified motivations and the potential for successful lengthening. The evaluation process involved psychological or psychiatric consultations, as well as various tests that they introduced, such as the Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory 2, Beck's Depression Inventory, the Quality of Life Inventory, and the Clinical Outcomes and Routine Evaluation. Additional documents were used to assess patients' understanding of complications and their coping abilities. Patients with pre-existing psychological difficulties, such as dysmorphia, were not considered for treatment unless they had been referred by their mental health team stating that limb lengthening was essential for the treatment of their mental health. Now, let's address some of the issues that were encountered during the treatment process. One patient had an issue when trying to pay for their medical treatment using insurance, as for cosmetic limb lengthening, insurance doesn't cover this, so they then had to pay out of pocket, but they weren't aware of this until after. Another patient initially complained about the slow healing compared to others. They eventually dropped the complaint once they were fully healed. The study also highlighted instances where some female patients expressed dissatisfaction after having fractures occur, as the desired results weren't achieved. Their concerns revolved around the fracture itself, insufficient information that was provided, complications caused by the surgery, and the minor after effects. However, it is important to mention that the fracture did not impact the final outcome of the procedure. The research study found that the main factors contributing to patient complaints were fractures, unrealistic expectations, and certain psychological conditions experienced during the process, such as going through a divorce or concealing pre-existing psychiatric issues during the assessment process. Notably, complaints were more common when patients sought treatment for complications from surgeries with limited experience in cosmetic limb lengthening. I had saw the reverse of that in one of the other papers that I was reading, that it stated that they sometimes knock people back after the psychological assessment because they are not suitable for treatment, and these patients then go away to a second clinic that doesn't have as much experience, and they don't do as thorough examination, and they get the process done, and then the patient comes back to the first clinic to expect them to fix complications that have happened because they've went ahead and done it anyway, because this process is all fueled by money. Additionally, problems arose when patients didn't follow important guidelines. Some neglected the proper technique, such as not clicking the nails properly, not holding the remote long enough for the magnet to activate the nail, while others failed to engage in exercise to maintain flexibility and muscle strength. Some engaged in contact or high-impact sports before the bone was fully fused, which increased the risk of fractures. Poor bone quality and non-compliance with recommendations also posed challenges. It's worth mentioning that patients not providing complete information or being honest with their doctors also led to complications. For example, some patients failed to disclose their use of medication that could affect bone healing. In a couple of cases, patients claimed that nails broke spontaneously without any trauma, but it was later discovered that the fractures occurred during skiing before their bones had fully fused. I do remember seeing a video on TikTok where it was a nurse talking about patients that come in and they lie about if they, how do I word this? If they smoke medicinally and they say no, and then it turns out they do. And if you're getting surgeries and stuff like that, it's really important to just be open and honest about these things, because they need to use different things of anaesthetic and stuff for your surgery, and your treatment can be different depending on medications and stuff that you're taking. However, because it is cosmetic and people know that they might get knocked back from this surgery, I feel like it is probably likely that they are more deceptive because they really want this done because they think it's going to solve everything, and that's just dangerous. That really follows on to one of the big things, which is the unrealistic expectations that some patients bring to the table. Patients projecting all of their hopes onto the surgery, believing that it's not only going to make them taller, but magically transform their whole personality. They're dreaming of oozing of all this confidence and charm like they've never had before. Have you ever encountered somebody who seems to project their own need for empowerment onto others? It's like their internal judgments really become external, and they start expecting everyone or everything around them to fulfill their desires. Individuals who are seeking empowerment and validation might place that burden on external factors like the surgery. They believe that by changing their physical appearance, they'll finally achieve the empowerment that they've been longing for. One patient discussed his lack of self-esteem during the pre-surgery psychological appointment and said, "I know I have psychological problems that can only be healed through surgery." Another patient reported, "If I grow my height, I will no longer be the one that's dismissed in conversation. I will have more power." And finally, the last quote was, "No one takes short people seriously. It's like you're always a child. I will be taller, therefore I won't be seen as a kid anymore." It's absolutely mind-boggling to think about the expectations that many patients bring with them when it comes to undergoing cosmetic limb lengthening. They're not just looking for a physical change, they're hoping for a complete psychological transformation. It's like they believe that growing taller will magically solve all of their problems and drastically change their personality and status. While cosmetic limb lengthening can certainly help enhance self-confidence and give a sense of empowerment, it really is essential to recognise that true empowerment comes from within yourself. It's about developing and embracing our own strengths and unique qualities, not just changing yourself to fit one of society's norms. Expecting limb lengthening to completely transform your entire being is venturing into magical thinking territory. I really think that expectations need to be managed accordingly and help patients understand that true change and empowerment comes from within, because I really think those three quotes that I mentioned, if I was that person carrying out the psychological assessment, they wouldn't be getting the operation done, because it's concerning. I don't think that is the way to help people, to be honest. Many patients undergoing limb lengthening are already dealing with a host of other stress factors in their lives. Imagine going through a divorce, losing your job, and dealing with conflicts all at once, whilst also undergoing the physically and emotional demanding process of limb lengthening. It is an extremely heavy psychological load that can seriously destabilise and throw patients off. And sometimes these things like loss of jobs actually come from not being able to work because of going through the lengthening process. To make matters worse, patients sometimes find themselves in very conflicting environments where they feel like they need to hide their decision to undergo this surgery from their loved ones. They're scared of being judged and rejected, so they isolate themselves and they lack the support from the people that they truly need around them. I honestly can't imagine what it would have been like going through the process of lengthening my bones without having any support and having to hide it from everyone. It is really infuriating that societal pressures force individuals to feel like they have to undergo these procedures. It's not fair, and it really shouldn't be the case. I really feel like we should be living in a world where people can truly embrace themselves as they are without feeling like they need to conform to unrealistic standards. So, after diving into the research in the world of cosmetic limb lengthening, I can definitely say that I understand more about why people choose to go through with it. But let me be clear, I don't think this is something that I'm ever going to agree with. Like I've mentioned plenty of times before, I really believe that this is an issue within society and it shouldn't even exist. When it comes to dating, I think it's important to recognise that everyone has their own preferences. There is a saying that someone had told me in the first year of uni, and it has always stuck with me, and that is, you can be the juiciest peach in the world and there is still going to be people that hate peaches. With billions of people out there, I feel like there really has to be someone for everyone. Speaking from my own experience of being disabled, I know that putting pictures of me with my prosthetic or me in my wheelchair on dating apps, that instantly is going to turn people away just from seeing that, because without speaking to me, they have the conception that they would need to help me more or that I am less capable. And to be honest, that's okay. I understand that it's not for everyone. I could hide my disability and just show pictures of my face, but I don't want to feel like I'm hiding a major part of myself. Plus, I'd have to reveal it eventually. It's not something I can hide forever. And having a conversation end abruptly after the fact that I mention I'm disabled, I feel would be a lot more hurtful than just having the trash take itself out before it even gets to the point of us having a conversation. Now, when it comes to family, friends, workplace environments, I really struggle to wrap my head around it. Why should personality traits like assertiveness, dominance, and leadership be based on age, height, gender, or physical appearance? It should be about how someone carries themselves and what their values and their ethics are. This is just my perception based on my own journey with limb lengthening, which wasn't elective but necessary to save my leg. I had a more extreme case where my bones were pretty fragmented and my infections and the complications after that led to me losing my leg. While internal nails may have a lower risk of complications, I still feel like the overall risk is far too high. The studies that I looked at highlighted the lack of information and the need for more research in this area. I did mention that the study that had 131 research studies that they had looked through, that only went up to 2006. I think the most recent study I had found was back in 2015, 2016. So most of the data that I was able to find on this was pretty outdated. Cosmetic surgery always has its critics. I guess I do feel a wee bit like I should take the stance that it doesn't harm me, why should I care? But I've noticed it gaining more attention and even receiving praise, and I can't help but think it's just quite dangerous. Although most people in the studies were happy with the outcome, there was those who weren't. Those who needed surgery to make adaptations to tendons and ligaments because they've not formed properly after lengthening the bone, and they decided that they didn't want to go through with that, but it's then left their limb less functional than where they started, and they've not achieved the results that they wanted to achieve. It is really risky because something like this, you're going from peak physical health to potentially leaving yourself disabled when you can gain 3 inches of height. I really just don't know how it's worth it. That wraps up today's episode. As ever, thank you so much for tuning in and listening and joining me for the exploration of cosmetic limb lengthening. I really hope that you have enjoyed this episode and that you enjoy the further episodes that I'm going to do looking into various different things. And I'm just really excited to be able to get some guests. If you're listening to this and you're disabled, you have an experience with Ilizarov frames, you honestly just want to have a chat with me, please get in contact over on Instagram at Cripple Chronicles Pod, or send me an email to cripplecchroniclespod@gmail.com. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, leave a comment, rate and review on audio platforms. Anything that you would like to get in contact with, I have already said. Please leave me a message on Instagram or send me an email. I really hope that you have a lovely week. Take care of yourself. Remember that it's important to embrace who we are, appreciate ourselves for more than just our physical appearance. I hope you take some time to love yourself this week.